Welcome to Andy Staples on 3, and we got some good old-fashioned intrigue heading into the college football playoff. That's right. I'm out here in LA getting ready to cover the Rose Bowl. Alabama and Michigan players were in for interviews on Thursday, and, well, somebody said something interesting. I know what you're thinking. With these two programs, they pretty much tell them not to say anything interesting, and most everyone complied, but Alabama receiver Isaiah Bond dropped a little nugget that became a whole thing.
How closely did you follow the whole sign stealing saga that kind of Michigan was engulfed in all year and how that all transpired?
Say one more time.
How much did you pay attention to all the sign stealing saga that Michigan had to deal with all year and the impact it had on college football and maybe their team?
I mean, yeah, the sign stealing. I heard about it. I really paid too much attention to it. Obviously, that's in the past. We obviously the catapult system that they was taking signs from was they made it down anyways for the playoffs because of that. So honestly, when we get on the field, they're gonna have to play us anyways. So all that sign stealing is not gonna help them.
Say more about that catapult. What was that?
It's basically like the app we record film on for practice and stuff like that, and they was looking at other people's play calls and their hand signals the first 8 games or something like that. So we wasn't able to we was able to watch film with the team, but personally we can't watch film because I don't know, some reason with Michigan stealing signs, but I'm not really too keyed in on that.
Your coaches told you that?
Yeah, our coach told us that probably a week ago before we was right before we about to come here, getting prepared for Michigan.
So on your individual tablets that you would normally be watching.
Yeah.
Right now you guys are not watching film.
Yeah, we're not allowed to.
I don't think he was supposed to tell us that. So here's how this works. When all these teams take tons of video of their own practices so they can examine everything and coach different things and say, fix this, do this differently. They review it after every practice and before each new practice to make sure they're optimizing what they're doing. All of this in 2023 goes into the cloud, and they have these cloud-based systems where teams store their video. And what he seems to be saying is Alabama said, no cloud here. We're not putting our practice footage in the cloud. If you want to watch it, you have to be at the facility. So never thought we'd use the term air gapped in a college football preview, but here we are. And that's a computer that's not connected to the internet in any way. I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing, but it does sound like they were trying to keep that stuff off the cloud in case prying eyes might be prying. So there you go. Michigan, you may be upset about that. If you're a Michigan fan, the accusation, the temerity, but you hear about this for 2 months and you're probably going to do something about it. So knowing how Nick Saban operates and how detail oriented he is, this is probably yet another precaution, but he also probably got on Isaiah Bond for revealing this little piece of information to the wider world. That's probably not something that Alabama wanted out there, but there you go. And if you want more motivation for Michigan, you've seen the Wolverines use this whole saga as motivation since it started. Now would be a time where they could take this as motivation and say, hey, we don't need this to beat you. And Alabama's saying it doesn't matter. You still got to beat us on the field. That's what Isaiah Bond said. We'll find out. We'll talk a little more about this with Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine, who's here with me in California. This is not going to go away. This is going to be a theme going into the game. And I know the Michigan fans are tired of it, don't want to hear about it anymore. It's going to follow them the entire season. So if they win and go to the national title game, it will still be a topic. I am sorry about that. But this is just one more reminder of all that stuff that happened before and how they got here. We'll see what happens in the game, but I don't know that this would have made any difference. Alabama probably could have kept its practice footage in the cloud, probably wouldn't have mattered, but now everybody can go into the game feeling like they did everything possible to make sure nobody has an edge that they shouldn't have. So we shall see. And we've heard from Terrion Arnold what it's like to get your ass chewed by Nick Saban. I think Isaiah Bond is going to have a really good story about that come game day. But some more interesting nuggets from Alabama players. Jalen Milroe, the quarterback, really interesting conversation with him and with Tommy Reese, their offensive coordinator, about the evolution of Alabama's offense over the season, but also about their own relationship. And it's a fascinating relationship between these two. Tommy Rees is a really young offensive coordinator. He's in his early 30s. He was the starting quarterback at Notre Dame in the 2010s. He, like Jalen Milroe earlier this season, got benched, found his way back in the starting lineup. He's been through a lot of this. He's been through the kind of pressure that you were under as Alabama's starting quarterback. I think, a Notre Dame starting quarterback in the social media age, that probably feels a lot like being the Alabama quarterback in the social media age. I don't know that there are a lot of coordinators or quarterbacks coaches who can identify with that. It's a pretty unique situation. And so it feels like these two really get along. And obviously, Tommy Rees has learned to call plays for Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe has figured out what works best for him in this offense. And you've seen that develop as the year has gone on. But very interesting thing that Jalen Milroe said about previous offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien, who's now with the New England Patriots. He minced no words. Someone asked Jalen Milroe probably a question that expected a little bit different answer, but got something really interesting.
Is there a moment where someone wanted you to play a different position or something and you kind of said, no, I'm a quarterback?
Shoot, all my life, even when I was in college. Shoot, my own offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, told me I shouldn't play quarterback. So, there's a lot of things I can, have motivation on, and that is something I have motivation from.
That is some serious motivation from Bill O'Brien, who, remember, when he's Alabama's offensive coordinator, he has been the Houston Texans head coach. He has been Penn State's head coach. He has been the New England Patriots offensive coordinator. He's been all of those things before he becomes Alabama's offensive coordinator. And so have that guy telling you shouldn't be playing quarterback, that doesn't feel great. And it did not sit well with Jalen Milroe. Now, follow-up question to that, got an even better response from Milroe.
What was your reaction to Bill O'Brien telling you that you shouldn't play quarterback? Do you remember how you felt when he said that?
How would you feel if I told you suck?
Probably wouldn't like it.
Okay then, so that's exactly how I felt, you know what I'm saying? So biggest thing for me, be true to myself and, stay the same. Nothing changed about me. Only thing that changed me was I had the opportunity and I seized it. And so for me, the biggest thing was just stay true to myself and, I had a bigger purpose than anyone's opinion.
Is there a position he wanted you to play or said you should be this position or that position, or did he just? He
told me a bunch of business I could have switched to, but look where I'm at right now. So, you know what I'm saying? So who gets the last laugh?
What an answer! Who gets the last laugh indeed? Look at the position he's in right now. He's exactly right. He stuck it out. He believed in himself. And this is a guy who I think at the beginning of the season, you would look at him and say, okay, this is not an NFL quarterback. But as the season has gone on, you're like, okay, we'll see what happens with another year of season because he's coming back for 2024. But Jalen Milroe has a chance right now to help his team win a national title. They're 2 wins away from a national title. And just what a great story. And he's a lot of fun to root for, just like J.J. McCarthy for Michigan. Both these guys are really enjoyable to watch. Their personalities are great. And then with Milroe, he and Terrion Arnold, the Alabama cornerback, they have basically a brand that they've created called LANK, and it stands for Let All the Naysayers Know. And when you hear that story, it really drives it home. So perhaps that will drive some sales at the LANK pop-up shop in Pasadena prior to the Rose Bowl. These guys have done a good job figuring out how to use NIL to connect with this. And, for Milroe, this is basically his life story printed on those t-shirts. So it's been really interesting to watch him develop through the year. And he's talked a lot, but he saved this little detail. And you can kind of tell he was glad to get that off his chest. There's a little living well is the best revenge, but he didn't have a problem saying, you know what? This guy didn't believe in me. He was a naysayer. Well, I'm letting all the naysayers know. Cannot wait to see Jalen Milroe line up against that incredible Michigan defense on Monday in the Rose Bowl. And this just adds another layer to it, just as what Isaiah Bond said about Alabama taking cybersecurity measures and precautions adds another layer to this game. Let's talk now to Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine about what's going on with Alabama and Michigan and the sign stealing scandal that never will go away. It's two guys in rocking chairs talking to Rose Bowl. Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine. We found a really nice spot down here.
It's classy
at the old Media Hotel. It's very Instagrammable. We've got the old Rose Bowl poster. We got some roses, and
I may steal a rose.
Don't do it. You have to earn the rose.
True.
You have to win your way to the rose.
I can't do that. I'm a media member.
That's true. That is true. Well, we are recording this, and it is going into the cloud, so our producer can put it into the show. So. Fortunately, you guys don't play for Alabama, so you can watch this anywhere. You don't have to go to the Alabama facility or Alabama's team hotel to watch this. Clayton, that was the blow up.
Yeah, someone cracked.
Mini blow up. Yeah, Isaiah Bond cracked. Talked about some of the precautions they're taking, and you've been covering this sign stealing situation all season. You've seen it with other teams too. Is it interesting to you how different teams have handled this information?
Yeah, and a lot of them, they don't go into a lot of detail. And I think, again, Isaiah Bond probably
wasn't supposed to.
Right, he said too much. But, that happens sometimes. I don't blame him, obviously. But, yeah, a lot of these teams have really just more talked about the signs and how they're mixing things up. And Nick Saban talked about that, I think, a week or two ago when he met with the media down in Tuscaloosa. But how they're going to, they do that typically. He said it's no big deal, whatever. Well, it sounds like they're not watching film individually. They have to watch them in groups at the facility. And then Tommy Reese got asked about it. No one really else wanted to comment. But
yeah. Now, what I would assume with this is it's the proprietary stuff, like your own practice video, that sort of thing. I would think if they want to watch Michigan's defense, they can do that as much
Michigan
as
has that film.
Everybody has that. Yeah. Exactly. But keeping stuff out of the cloud. And look, in this day and age, it's interesting to me because you think about how much information, and until all of this blew up, I never thought about that, how much information each college football program puts into the cloud in general.
Right. It's crazy. And you hear about Catapult as kind of that system that everybody uses. And then, there are rumors and Twitter accounts saying, well, this team has this they got their film off of Catapult and they hacked it. Who knows what's real or what's not. But
the videos of these interviews that were done here today, if we media members want to access them, we go through Catapult.
Everything runs through Catapult.
Yeah, and that's also the system where they have the wearables that tell you how fast the people are going, the GPS data and all that. So if you wanted to get paranoid about it, you could get very, very paranoid about this stuff.
Right. You could. And I think, Nick Saban's a guy who, is ultra competitive, wants to get an edge any way he can, wants to protect the edges they may have in any way. And Jim Harbaugh is kind of the same way. So, it doesn't surprise me necessarily. It's just something I didn't really think about coming down.
I just didn't think an Alabama player would crack. That's really the part that more amusing than anything else, because they are very controlled in what they say. Michigan's the same way. You didn't expect, you came into this expecting everybody to just coach speak, give 110% one play at a time. And got a little juice.
Do you remember the Quinnen Williams when he almost said that? What did he say? Something about Kyler Murray, but
yes,
he doesn't think he's all that.
I was standing there,
and then he just stopped.
He
talking.
froze. It was like someone zapped him from remote.
It's still one
from
of my
the cloud.
It's one of my favorite moments.
It was that was the Orange Bowl after the 2018 season, and I remember that.
Have you gone up against any quarterback that slightly resembles Kyler Murray?
No, I don't feel like I have going against a quarterback slightly resembling Kyler Murray, but I feel like Kyler Murray is not worried about.
What's that?
No, I'm good.
It was like someone had zapped him with an electric shock. Like
Saban.
Oh, yeah. Well, Saban not actually pressing the button,
right?
Though he probably he has the button that closes the door in the office. I'm pretty sure he has the zapping button and probably a trap door somewhere.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is much more fun than I thought this interview session was going to be. But the Michigan players, I did enjoy, not with you. I knew that was going to be fun.
Oh, I think okay.
Yeah, but the Michigan players got into detail on the beat the Beat Georgia drill,
Yeah.
which is called now, or well, it was called for a minute. It's the Beat Ohio drill. It's the Beat Bama drill, I guess they're calling it now. But it's basically the inside run drill they do, and it's kind of taken on these mythical proportions. But it was fun hearing them talk about it, because as somebody who's been through some of those inside 7-on-7 drills, it is the nastiest portion of any football practice.
Yeah. And I think Beat Ohio is the 9-on-7. So you have all the run fits. If you're in the run game, it's a stacked box and basically trying to do that. And then I think the Beat Georgia drill, now Beat Bama drill, is something very similar. Loud music playing, those guys getting it going. I will say, I think, and we can talk about it too, obviously, but one of the things that Michigan may be challenged with in this game is more the speed of Alabama, rather than, and then obviously Alabama's got the size and the physicality. They've got all that too, that to match that maybe, and then some against Michigan. But the speed is something that came up a lot with a lot of these Michigan guys too. And, they're confident in their ability, I think, but it's definitely going to be something that plays a part in this game.
Well, I think it's what people get confused about with the whole idea of SEC speed. Like, the skill position players everywhere are fast. Like, the skill position players in the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, they're all fast.
Right.
It's when you get the giant linemen who move very fast too. That said,
your guy, Kenneth Grant.
That's right. The fastest lineman in this game, the fastest 300-pounder in this game, plays for Michigan.
Yeah. Kenneth Grant. And I forget who said it earlier or today. Well, it was Jesse Minter, and he wasn't here a few years ago when Michigan played Alabama. And you and I talked about this a week or two ago. But the one position or one area Michigan has grown in since these two teams played in the Citrus Bowl to kick off 2020 is the defensive line, and particularly having the type of athletes, maybe not as many as a Georgia or Alabama, but having some of those types of athletes. And Kenneth Grant's one of them. Chris Jenkins, I think, could hang in that category. Mason Graham, who we talked to today, is right up there and much tougher, faster, more physical, and has better technique than maybe you would guess, but just watching him walk around. But Michigan has those types of guys. It's just, are they going to match up with the speed? Are they going to be able to, maybe break tendency a little bit and catch them off guard?
I think both of these teams have very well-equipped defensive lines. They've got a bunch of future NFL players on their defensive line. I think both offensive lines are the area of concern, because you saw it with Alabama, especially early in the season, where they were very susceptible on the edges. If you had a good edge rusher, you could get home. Now, they've changed their play calling a little bit to let Jalen Milroe move around a little more, because he was walking himself into sacks at times. But Michigan, late season, we'll go to the Penn State game where they basically abandoned the pass because they were struggling to protect.
Yeah, and now you're down Zach Zinter too. So it was the guy Carson Barnhart who was struggling at right tackles. Now you're right guard. Trente Jones likely, again, he started in the Iowa game, likely to start at right tackle. So it's something, I've watched a lot of Alabama over the last few weeks. And I mean, Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell, 92, can't pronounce his name at the time. Aboigbe,
you got it?
They're as good as it gets. Dallas Turner, Todd McShay was saying he's his number one defensive prospect right now. And then you have the corners too. So Alabama may be able to commit more towards the run. So Michigan has not run blocked all that well, especially getting to the second level this season. It's something you wouldn't expect. It's been more the pass. It's been more running when they've needed to. Short yardage, they're fantastic. But overall, from a down-to-down basis, it's not been the run game that it has been the last 2 years. So now with Zinter out and facing probably the best front you faced this year, I mean, Penn State probably up there, but I would take this one from Alabama, especially the guys on the line of scrimmage. It's going to be a big challenge for the Michigan offensive line. At the same time, Michigan's got waves of guys that'll rotate in on the D line and try to give these guys fits. But I watched some Alabama early on, Caden Proctor with some issues, but lately he's been much better. Yeah. Lately, the entire offense line has been much better. I know you've pointed out the way they've schemed that up with
they're helping a lot more with Caden Proctor. Although you go back to the Georgia game, he doesn't need as much help as he did, because Tommy Reese talked today, the Alabama offensive coordinator. He said for Caden Proctor, the light came on kind of after the Arkansas game, and that game was a nightmare for him. Okay. He was just whipped, time and time again. And, Arkansas had a 6'7", 290-pound edge rusher who was just, being a grown man basically against a freshman.
18-year-old.
And even if you're, even when you're 340 pounds at 18, that's right, he's 360. You're still 18. You're still 18
for sure. And there was a play 11 from Georgia, Walker, gets past him, and I know they blitz, so it's kind of might even be the the identifying what's coming and all that, that could be an issue. And I think Michigan, with the way they line up their edges pretty wide, will be a different look that he's going to have to face. When you're bigger, I mean, it's easier to kind of swallow guys up like that, but you also may not move as fast. So I think that's something, Michigan, again, we were talking to J.C. Latham over there about, how many edge guys Michigan's going to rotate in. So you're facing a different guy every play. Michigan probably try to keep them off guard with a lot of the twists they use, a lot of the stunts. So, I mean, the O-lines in this game could determine, who wins.
Well, I'm going to break tendency because I don't want to say that the O-line determines everything.
True.
But for Michigan, I do think J.J. McCarthy, his mobility is going to matter. And I know he's looked somewhat limited at the end of the season. It looked like he had something going on with a knee, but he's now had a month off.
Yeah.
And a healthy J.J. McCarthy, I feel like, is a very different quarterback because he is capable of moving around. He's capable of making some of those mistakes go away.
He is. And, you saw that in the beginning of the year. And then, they would kind of dial back a lot of the design run stuff, to try to keep him upright, keep him clean, not use it when they don't have to. And I think that could play a part in this game too, not just his ability to extend the plays and throw it downfield. Honestly, too, some of his better plays have been when there's a breakdown in offensive line protection.
Jalen Milroe too.
Jalen Milroe too. Absolutely. So then, but going back to the design run thing, watching that Auburn game against Alabama and what Auburn did, Hugh Freeze, give him a ton of credit for what they did with their offensive game plan. They complete 6 passes in that game from the quarterback.
Michigan fans familiar with Peyton Thorne, former Michigan State quarterback.
Absolutely. And you wouldn't think that would be some sort of blueprint that they're looking at going into a college football playoff. Michigan's got to do a bunch of other stuff. They also got to stick with what they do. But I think they can do some of what Auburn did in the design run game for J.J. McCarthy. They've held it back all year. You'd see it a couple times here and there, but this is a time where you break it out. Last year, they didn't do that against TCU until the second half.
And it worked.
It's a big regret, and it worked really well against that defense. You gotta use that. I think this game's also going to come down to a lot of third and shorts, third and mediums for Michigan, and whether or not you can stay on the field, because Alabama's going to stay on the field with Milroe probably. But then again, it's a key for them too. So it's another cliche, third down, red zone, but there's so much that goes into it.
But that's the thing. I mean, these are 2 really good teams. The talent is pretty close. I mean, it comes down to the cliche stuff, whether we like it or not. It really does come down to, can you convert your third and shorts? Can you stay out of bad down and distances? I mean, that's the thing that Alabama struggled with early in the season. Is we talked about whether it was the line play or even Milroe, and a lot of it, like hearing the Alabama reporters ask Tommy Reese the questions today, because they don't get to talk to him all year. And so hearing him talk about the evolution of the play calling,
he's done a great job.
It is really different than the beginning of the season.
It is. And again, like obviously some people watching, Alabama fans and you and whatever, have watched more than me, but kind of going through their games and watching 4 or 5 full games throughout the year, what they've done to build this offense around Jalen Milroe has been super impressive. And one thing I noticed, especially late in the year, is when the game's on the line, when a drive is on the line, in those third down, red zone situations, they're putting the ball in number 4's hands.
Yeah.
So Michigan's got to know that. And, a lot of running quarterbacks, that's the case, where you kind of know a draw is coming at certain points, but sometimes it's frustrating because you can't stop it because you got to cover everybody else too. So it's going to come down to, I think, what quarterback plays better too. I mean, again, that's another cliche. But
it's interesting because I think the average person is looking at these matchups and going, oh, the Quinn Ewers, Michael Penix Jr. matchup is the quarterback matchup that we really want to see. This, in Alabama and Michigan, it's the trenches. Listen, these are 2 of the swaggiest quarterbacks you will ever meet, Jalen Milroe and J.J. McCarthy. Like, I would like to hear them just talk to each other for about 30 minutes, because I bet they would have a fascinating conversation.
Great personalities.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the first time I've, got to listen to Jalen Milroe in person and everything, and see him walk in the room. And, he definitely has the swag there. JJ, is kind of that confident and like super nice, but he's got that
there's
kind
an
of
edge to
warrior.
JJ. You can definitely see that when he talks. And I think I feel like that's come out more in his interviews since all of the signal stealing stuff, and because he's sort of embraced the Michigan versus everybody mentality.
He's kind of protecting, with the program. He knows Harbaugh can't say certain things, and the coaches. So the things they can say, I think JJ's been a great voice for them. And I mean, he's not a captain, but he's as big of a leader on this team as it gets too.
Well, I cannot wait to see those 2 get it on Monday. And listen, that line of scrimmage is going to be so much fun, because it is sometimes you have a situation where one O-line is clearly better than the other, one D-line is clearly better than the other. The O-lines are both the ones you worry about in this one. The D-lines are both the ones that scare you in this one.
Right.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
It is. I'm excited. We got a couple more days of coverage here, but it is going to be insanely fun on Monday.
Clayton, Sayfie, not afraid to put this in the cloud. You can watch it anywhere you want. That's me and Clayton Sayfie sitting in some rocking chairs, and that's a pretty good setup. Anytime you can do an interview in a rocking chair, it is the way to go. I highly, highly, highly recommend. You know what else I recommend? Game Time. Download that Game Time app. Use your promo code STAPLES. Get $20 off your first purchase. The easiest, most effective, least stressful way to get last-minute tickets. Do you want to go to the Rose Bowl? You can go to the Rose Bowl. Just type Rose Bowl into Game Time. All the tickets that are available will come up. There'll be a picture of the stadium. You click it. It'll show you exactly what the vantage point would be from the seat that you would be buying. Want to go to some of these other, but want to see Nico Iamaleava make his starting debut for Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl? You could do that. Head to Orlando. I imagine some last-minute tickets are going to get bought for that game with Nico starting in it. They got flash deals. They got zone deals. Game Time has it all. So download the app, use the code STAPLES, and get $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Now we talk to one of our friends who we've seen quite a bit this season. Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl is going to join us to help preview these games, because this is a guy who gets very excited about games like this, because as a former scout and a guy who now brings the best senior players into the Senior Bowl to get prepared for the NFL draft, he is watching with the scout's eye, and he loves these good on good games. And there's about to be a whole bunch of them. So let's talk to Jim about some of these matchups that are coming up. We are joined now by our friend Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl. And Jim, I am excited to talk to you because we've talked throughout this season, and going into big games, you've been really amped up to see good on good. There's a lot of good on good coming up with these New Year's Six Bowl games and with the college football playoff. I guess we should start with, who are you most excited to watch here these next few days?
Well, we could go game for game, Andy, and just pick out a prospect. But no, I'm excited, to see some of the Texas-Washington game. There's some really good matchups. Troy Fatanu, the left tackle for Washington, Rosengarten, the right tackle. I mean, you're going to be going up against a front with a bunch of great Texas players. I mean, that front with, Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, our two Senior Bowl guys we have committed and are good players. And then you got Alfred Collins and you got Baron Sorrells. I mean, that's a big time front four. So that's a fun matchup. But again, we could go game to game. Excited to see the Bama guys, Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell, up against that Michigan offensive line. So there's some really good trench matchups this weekend's games.
Yeah, so I'm in California. I'm covering that Rose Bowl, and Dallas Turner's name has been brought up a lot. And I realize, in the NFL circles, his stock has been very high all along. But what is it about him that makes him so special?
I would say the athlete. When you were doing Will Anderson last year for last year's draft, I mean, you kept seeing 15 on the other side. And it was just, the get off, the bend. I mean, Will's a great player. I'm not comparing the two guys as football players, because Will Anderson is an unbelievable football player. And as you know, with all your connections in Tuscaloosa, like, his makeup was off the charts. Mm-hmm. But just athletically, some of the movement stuff, some of the counter stuff that he's going to be capable of, Dallas Turner's just a really high-end athlete.
So you mentioned that Sugar Bowl, the interior guys at Texas. Mike Penix Jr. playing against this defense. I mean, we've seen him play against Oregon, where they were coming after him quite a bit, and it didn't seem to faze him at all. How excited are you to see him against a very good secondary with a decent pass rush too?
Yeah, and it's a great point. I don't think Texas secondary gets enough credit. There's some really good players in that back end too. We got Jahdae Barron coming to the Senior Bowl, and they got 3 or 4 other guys that are going to get drafted or be in a camp at least. So a lot of NFL talent back there. It is going to be a good showcase for Michael Penix, because you would expect this Texas front to be able to get some push. And it's one thing, it's one thing to avoid some outside pressure and be able to step up and maneuver the pocket. But it's a whole different thing when that pressure is coming in your face, right? I think that's the goal of any defensive coordinator, is to get some gut pressure and get the guy on the move a little bit, kind of move him off that spot. And so I think we'll see that, as good as Washington's offensive line is, and they won the Joe Moore Award, deservedly so. It's a really good offensive line. They've done a great job with that group. But they're going to get home up the middle. I mean, you can't hold Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat in check the entire game. So I think the NFL folks will want to see that.
So how do you evaluate a quarterback when he has that loaded of a receiving core? And I think we've talked about this with Alabama quarterbacks, with Ohio State quarterbacks of recent vintage, where their top 3 receivers are better than any of the other team's receivers, period. How do you adjust when you're evaluating for that?
Well, usually with good receivers, there's a lot of run after catch, going back to that Alabama group with Jalen Waddle and Judy and Ruggs and those guys. I mean, they do so much after the catch. So you obviously strip that away. And you really just focus on the anticipation and the decision-making and the accuracy. And again, there's a lot of pitch and catch throws that from an NFL evaluator standpoint, you can just throw those reps out. I mean, they're not even, you could look at an entire game and maybe only 15% of the throws are really evaluative. So you're just looking for when there is a tight window, in the ability to anticipate and put the ball on the mark. So you can't take that away from these guys, that they have good players to throw to. You can't ding them for that.
Well, and Penix, it seems like the ball's just on the money every single time. That's the part that amazes me. Even against the best defenses he played, it was just right in there.
Well, and it's down the field, and it's the trajectory of the ball, and the catchable ball. And I saw that at the Manning camp a couple summers ago. I mean, you see these guys throw live. You can get a really good sense for who's throwing a catchable ball, who's throwing a heavy ball. And that's what Mike does probably better than anyone in the class. I mean, this is a great class now. But Mike's quick strike ability to hit those plays down the field, I mean, that's his calling card, man. So if you're an NFL offense that really likes to push it vertically, I mean, this is your guy. His down the field accuracy is a lot better than a lot of guys' intermediate accuracy.
So let's talk about some of the guys that have committed to the Senior Bowl already that you guys have announced. Before we started recording, I mentioned one of them, and this is one for the college football sickos. This guy has been a star for a few years. Iowa's Torrey Taylor, the best player at Iowa, perhaps one of the best players. Well, definitely one of the best players in the Big Ten. But this is a punter who is a weapon.
He's had to be, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Someone that was at the I was talking to a scout that was at Iowa Senior Day, and they were saying when they introduced Torrey, he got a bigger ovation than anybody, and he was the punter. So yeah, he's taken on a little bit of folk hero status, which is cool. I mean, and he's an Aussie, right? So he's an older guy. He's an Aussie. We had Steve Wisnowski from the 49ers in the game, like my second or third year here at the Senior Bowl. I don't know what it is about these Aussie guys, man. Like they're great dudes. They're cool guys. So we're excited to have them down here. I've seen people comment online, like, why would you even bring the Iowa punter? Like, what more does that kid have to show?
What can he show? But he's trying to get drafted in like the 3rd round here instead of the usual punter spot.
Right. So it was a career achievement award. He put in his miles, got in all the kicks, but no, he'll have a great week down here. We're excited to get him down. Those specialist guys. It's a good group. I mean, Torrey's one, but I think usually in a good year we have 3 or 4 of our guys drafted, and I think this year I think all 4 of the guys we brought to kick and punt will get drafted.
Another guy I'm excited about because I'm watching him all season, and I think the wider college football world woke up to Braden Fisk during the ACC championship game, watching him dominate for Florida State against Louisville. He's a Western Michigan transfer, defensive tackle, probably not exactly what you're looking for from a measurable standpoint as a DT, but then you get him on the field and he's an animal.
He's an animal. I was actually talking with an NFL guy about him this morning and about that, Florida State defense. And he was like, man, I think the best player on the whole defense is the Fiske kid. And I said, well, there is a guy named Jared Verse, right? Did we
He's pretty good too.
But you said Braden was at Western Michigan last year, and we're going to reunite him with one of his ex-teammates, Marshawn Nealon from Western Michigan, who almost went to Colorado and played for Coach Prime this fall. But no, getting back to Braden Fiske, I mean, he is, you want to pigeonhole him as like this, undersized, like white, try-hard plugger defensive tackle, and the guy's super disruptive. He can really run. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we've talked about maybe even playing him at some fullback here at the Senior Bowl, and what he is, like, it started to show up in that ACC championship game. I think he had the 3 sacks. So, like, there was some paper production there. But going back over the course of the season, he's truly one of those guys that creates for people around him. Like, he blows stuff up. He's super disruptive with his get off, and then, like, creates this chaos, and then guys clean up around him. Like, again, usually you see a guy like him, you're like, oh, he's the cleanup guy. They're like, no, he's actually the guy that they're cleaning up after. So really a cool player. And I told him when we spoke that, I'm like, man, bring that same intensity to practice. Like, we need tone setters during our game week to keep practices, really spirited. And he's like, I got you, Jim. I'll make sure I do that. So we're excited to get him here for sure.
So my favorite part of Senior Bowl practices when I watch them is the one-on-one pass protection drills. I'm looking at your edge rushers. You got Adisa Isaac from Penn State, Darius Robinson from Missouri, and I know there's other ones on the way. McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M, and then the offensive tackle group like Christian Jones from Texas. Like, what matchup are you most excited to see, either on the interior or tackle versus edge guy?
There are some great ones. I would say, Leatu Latu from UCLA right now.
Oh yeah.
He's being projected to be somewhere in that first round. He think about this. He could be on that Washington football team. As great a season as Washington has had, he could be on that front opposite Braylon Trice right now. But he had the neck injury, and they shut him down, and UCLA cleared him, and he's been a stud. He's really the most skilled rusher in this draft. We've talked about Dallas Turner in the athleticism. Latu's a little different. He's very, very skilled guy. So to go against this group of tackles, whether it be Troy Fatanu from Washington, Patrick Paul from Houston, just trying to go through that list, some really, really good tackles. Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. I think he's gonna blow everyone away. I think there's a lot of Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt talk right now, and there should be. They're great players. But if you talk about ceilings of this year's tackle class, I think Tyler Guyton's got the highest ceiling. I mean, he does things on tape that even those 2 other guys don't do athletically. So big week for him. That would be a great one. Latu and Tyler Guyton. We talked about Tyler Guyton on the show the other day. I was telling everybody, you're going to be hearing his name over and over and over again for the next 4 months. I just remember Gabe Eichert is a friend of mine. He played center at Oklahoma and works in the media in Oklahoma City, Norman area. And he said the first words out of his mouth about Tyler Guyton, freak show. And like, was a tight end at TCU. Like, this guy is potentially one of the more athletic tackles we've seen in a long time. In a long time. And again, his tape was super easy to do over the summer. I mean, that's the nice part about the Senior Bowl evaluation. Like, once you get to a point where, like, oh, they're good enough for us to invite, you don't really have to keep going that far. He just does things like a smaller man. I mean, his ability to play at the second level and get out in space. I mean, he runs, he moves, he slides like a smaller guy. And to me, he's playing on the right side for Oklahoma. And the guy, so he kind of reminded me athletically, and right side players, Tyron Smith, coming out of USC. And, Tyron's been a kind of a multiple time All-Pro for the Dallas Cowboys. That's the kind of ceiling that Tyler Guyton has. If it all clicks, and I think it's going to click, we're talking about a Pro Bowl, All-Pro level player. I cannot wait to see it. Very excited. I know you're waiting to watch these games these next few days, Jim, and we'll get back together afterward and see how everybody did and see who else is coming to the game, because I know there's some big names out there that you guys are waiting to reel in after bowl season. Yeah, we're sitting on some big ones, Andy. We got some commitments. Then the guys don't want us to announce till after they get done with the bowls, which totally respect, totally get. But Monday's going to be dicey. It's a house divided here in Mobile. My wife is a Bama grad, so we, a lot of people have reached out like, hey, you guys want to watch the game? And I'm like, I am not going to be the only Michigan person in a house full of Bama fans. Like that is not happening. It's going to be my wife and our kids. And if Michigan, loses or however that thing falls, we're not going to have any outside influences. So it should be,
exactly
congrats
right.
that you're out there, man. That should be an awesome setting for that game. I'm jealous. Enjoy it, man. And look forward to talking in a couple weeks.
I cannot wait. I will text you some pictures pre-game. Thank you so much, Jim.
Love it. Thanks, Andy.
That's Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl. He's going to be a very, very busy man because once these games end, you'll see some of the biggest names committing to the Senior Bowl. You will then see the practice week itself with the scouts and all of them descending on Mobile. We'll be there too. So we will get a good bird's eye view of all of those guys as they get ready. And we'll talk to them as they are leaving college football. We'll do some college football exit interviews as well. But next up, we got to pick some of the biggest games. JD Pickell, my tag team partner at On 3, going to join us to pick the New Year's 6 games and the college football playoff games. But first, we're going to talk about Prize Picks, the most fun daily fantasy app on the internet. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Andy, and they will match your first deposit up to $100. Then you can just start having fun. So I just put down a Prize Picks play on some of the New Year's 6 games. So you know how I feel about this. I like rooting for people. I don't like rooting against people. So on Prize Picks, you pick your squares, and it could be college football, NFL, NBA. It'll be a player and then a statistical measure. So this player will score this many touchdowns. This player will score this many points. This player will grab this many rebounds. And you pick at least 2 squares, and then you decide how much you want to put down. I am rooting for, not against, Quinshon Judkins, the Ole Miss running back. They're playing Penn State in the Peach Bowl. 0.5 rushing touchdowns. I went more. Brady Cook, the Missouri quarterback. They're playing Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. 1.5 passing, rushing, or receiving, in case there's a trick play, touchdowns. I picked more. Devin Brown. Devin Brown is starting for the Buckeyes against Missouri. This feels like an audition where Devin Brown can say, hey, look, I know you're in the portal. I know you're looking at other quarterbacks. Kyle McCord's gone. I'm your guy. I'm your QB1 for 2024. We saw this with Miller Moss in the USC Louisville Holiday Bowl. So Devin Brown's number is 224.5 passing yards. I said more. Let's let Devin Brown give it a shot. Let's let Devin Brown make his case for QB1. All kinds of fun can be had. I've got a play on the Alamo Bowl where I'm saying I want this sucker to be a shootout. It is the dawn of the Jackson Arnold era at Oklahoma. That game, as we are running this show, is about to kick off. So I got Jackson Arnold more than his passing total. I got Noah Fafita, the Arizona quarterback, more than his passing total. We are going to have some fun action on Prize Picks all weekend because these games are going to be incredible, but they can be even more fun if you got a few squares on Prize Picks with them. So download the Prize Picks app, use the code Andy, and they will match your first deposit up to $100. Now it is time for picks with JD Pickell. All right, we have picked all the other bowl games. We've used a coin. I think I beat the coin, but I think we both sucked. In general, our records were not great. But we also had Ralph Russo come on. As I'm watching Rutgers and Miami, we may have both missed this one because we both picked Rutgers, but we'll see how this goes. It's not over yet. We're working our way through all of the bowl games right now. JD Pickell joins us. You know him, you love him. Host of the Hard Count every Tuesday and Thursday live, and also you see JD throughout the week here on the On3 YouTube channel.
What's going on, Andy, man? Glad to be on with you. I know we got a lot to jump into. I know you're out in beautiful, sunny California. I hope it's sunny for you. I'm not sure if it's been that way, but man, glad to be on with you. Glad to pick some bowl games. The most wonderful time of the year where meaningless bowl games. I don't know if that term exists in your lexicon, but all these to me have a little bit of meaning.
They are all meaningful. All you need to do is watch the winning team celebrate, watch the coach get something dumped on his head, whatever it is. Sometimes it's creative, sometimes it's just, desperation, but it is always fun. And yes, it is sunny after a smoggy arrival. It is a sunny day in Southern California, and I'm excited about this, JD. So we've got the New Year's Six Bowls. Two of them seem very competitive and like we're going to get the versions of the teams that we saw all year. One of them doesn't look like it's going to be anything like we saw all year. And then one feels like a mismatch. But then we've also got those college football playoff games, and both of those seem pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. Lot of big time games to unpack here. Is there one to you that like is the most intriguing matchup? Like, is there one here where you're just, going back and forth with the coin and trying to get a gauge for it?
I kind of feel that way about both the playoff games. I don't have a great read on either one of them, and the spreads are close for a reason. They're both, we've got a 1.5 point spread and a 4.5 point spread, and there's good reason for that. I don't think anybody has a great idea of what's going to happen, but if we're going into the New Year's Six, I'll start. Well, we can start with Missouri and Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. So Ohio State's a 3.5 point favorite, and that number keeps changing. This is an interesting one where Missouri is going to be basically intact. And we talked to Eli Drinkwitz last week about his attitude toward guys in the portal, and basically they're allowed to play and they can practice. And as long as they're portaling and looking for a new school doesn't interfere with the team, they're welcome to be members of the team and play in this game. And it feels like it's a really big deal for them. Ohio State, Kyle McCord's gone. It's a Devin Brown game. Like, this feels really intriguing because if we're going to talk about who definitely cares about being there, I think we know it's Missouri.
Yeah, and honestly, Andy, we probably should have known that Missouri was going to be a wagon this year when you sat down with Eli Drinkwitz at SEC Media Days. He was rocking like the chrome Nikes. Like, for me, I was like, dang, in hindsight, I should have known they were going to be cooking this year. I'm curious to see, just like you said, the want-to factor for Ohio State. I tune in pretty frequently to the Letterman Row YouTube channel, the Ohio State on 3 YouTube channel. And they're, by nature of what they're saying from the boots on the ground report, like a lot of those guys are talking about coming back for another year in 2024. Mm-hmm. Jack Sawyer being one of them, JT Tuimoloau being one of them. And so I'm kind of wondering if they're thinking, yes, this year hasn't gone how we wanted it to, but this is a chance now for us to kind of springboard in 2024 with a guy in Devin Brown who, heck, if he goes out there and slings the pill around the yard pretty effectively to like 3 bills and a couple of touchdowns, maybe there's a conversation for him to be the guy next year and all that portal noise dies down. So the intrigue factor is high, but I actually think we're going to get a pretty good version of Ohio State in this game.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see Marvin Harrison. I know that there's been no announcement or anything, but I'm just guessing that there's no Marvin Harrison in this game. But the Devin Brown factor is really interesting to me. And I think, watching Miller Moss play for USC in the Holiday Bowl was a good example of there are guys who believe they are the guy and they just want their chance. And once they get it, they're going to show out. And maybe Devin Brown's that guy.
And the buzz all offseason between him and Kyle McCord was, hey, Devin Brown arguably makes more plays than Kyle McCord. The unfortunate reality is sometimes he makes more plays for your defense, which is why Kyle McCord ended up being the steady hand they went with. But no, I think anytime you got a quarterback that wears number 33, got a little bit of moxie to you. You got a little bit of that it factor to you if you're down to wear the number in the 30s and play quarterback, much less be the guy at a place like Ohio State. So I think just from a pure physical gifting standpoint, I don't know that you lose anything without Kyle McCord on the field. Now, the obvious question is, do you have that same sound decision-making? Is this moment going to be too big for a one Devin Brown? Because I look at this offense, and I'm like, even without Marvin Harrison Jr., Travion Henderson being in the ball game, we'll see if Emeka Egbuka is good to go, and if he ends up playing, it sounds like he will, Andy, if I'm not incorrect on that assumption. Like, there's still some guys to throw the ball to. Carnell Tate's playing. Like, there's a lot of guys still to make some plays for you.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. And the Marv factor is huge, though. We've seen games where Marv was the difference. At Penn State and Wisconsin, I think were 2 games where Marv was the absolute difference in the game. Missouri's more talented than if you didn't watch Missouri in a lot of games this season, you might think, okay, maybe they benefited from a favorable schedule. Or no. Missouri was good all year, and they're well put together. Brady Cook's been awesome at quarterback. Cody Schrader is the story of the year in college football. I mean, D2 Truman State transfer, walked on, and then they got a bunch of dudes on their defense. And again, they're basically intact. They don't have a lot of opt-outs. That's the part that I would be scared of if I'm Ohio State, because this is a team, like, they've played Georgia as tough as anybody played Georgia till Alabama beat Georgia. This is a good team, and I'm really excited to see this game. And also, more Harrison Mevis. Anytime Harrison Mevis is involved, it's going to get wacky.
The thicker kicker, baby. From deep. Anywhere you need it, he can get it for you. Yeah, he's must-see TV anytime he lines it up. But no, I mean, I think what you said just about Cody Schrader being a guy for them, like, how was he ever playing D2 is my question. And what kind of numbers did he put up?
How did he not gain 7,000 yards a year in D2?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, I think the other thing to look at here, too, for me, with what Missouri does defensively, like, Andy, you know this, they're going to heat him up a little bit now. Like, they're going to be true to who they have been all year long. They got after Carson Beck pretty good when they played Georgia. They will have that same flavor defensively. And it's one thing to be able to handle that if you're Carson Beck, you're playing at home. You've seen a fair amount of different defenses throughout the year. This is Devin Brown's first day out. So how he handles that pressure from Missouri, I think, really will be the story in the game and will be the ultimate deciding factor on who wins this game.
So the thing is, if you're going to give me a Harrison Mevis field goal and half a point, I think I'm going to take Missouri in this game.
Yeah, you know, the spread, if it was at 2.5, I'd feel a little bit better about going Ohio State. But even with that being said, I think Ohio State's ability to lean on Travion Henderson and then kind of that question mark, almost the mystery box of the playmaking factor for Devin Brown, I'm actually going to lean towards Ohio State to cover this one just barely, Andy. And I think they probably land somewhere around a 5 or 6 point victory, but I'll take Ohio State to cover here, actually.
All right. This is going to be a fun one. Another fun one where it seems like both teams are very intact and very excited about what's to come. Ole Miss and Penn State in the Peach Bowl. You know, it feels like we're getting the versions of these teams that we saw during the season. And Ole Miss, I mean, I think if you're just looking at what they're getting in the portal, they're looking like, okay, this is our springboard to a very special 2024. They can finish it off with win number 11. And then Penn State, they're tired of everybody saying, oh, but you never beat Michigan or Ohio State. Well, guess what? Next year doesn't matter. Like, this team can make the playoff regardless of how that goes. Plus, no more divisions in the Big Ten. So, I mean, Adisa Isaac says he's going to play in this game for Penn State. Like, there's really good players in this game. And I'm excited about this one too.
Oh, this will be a lot of fun. And like you alluded to a little bit with Ole Miss, I don't know who wants to see them in a 10-team or in a 12-team playoff right now if they were to, carry over their momentum from earlier in the regular season and the way they're playing. A curious thing for me in this one is how much Penn State asks of Drew Aller, because as good as he is and as talented as I think he is just from a physical gifting standpoint, he's going to be good in Happy Valley for a long time. We've seen a couple instances where against better competition, they've taken away that run game from him. I think the Michigan game and the Ohio State game are the two that you point to. And it's been a little bit of a struggle. Now, is that on Drew Aller? Is that on the receiving core not being able to separate consistently enough? Ole Miss, similar to what we said about Missouri, they're going to heat him up a little bit. Suntarine Perkins, a dude who's been just that, a dude for Ole Miss as a true freshman this year. I'm curious how much pressure they're able to apply and how much they ask of Drew Aller if you're Penn State and what they ask him to do throwing the football downfield if that run game isn't there how they want it to be.
That is the key question. And Ole Miss is pretty good up front. They will get after him. And so I was at Drew Aller's last game at Ford Field when they played Michigan State. And I saw him against Michigan as well. And in the games where he was not pressured, man, he will just pick you apart. He did that to Michigan State. He did it to Maryland. He weirdly did it to Iowa, as good as Iowa was. But then when there's some athletes on the other side, especially that can lock up their receivers, he doesn't pull the trigger as fast as they'd like him to. I think that's probably the biggest thing is guys are open. Like I remember in the Michigan game, the crowd would gasp as somebody sprung open and he didn't throw it. He clutched and it's like, oh no, what do we do now? And that's the part I worry about because Ole Miss, you are dealing with quite a bit of speed defensively. You're dealing with a decent front seven. that will get after you. So that's the part I worry about. And then, but the Penn State rush defense, are they going to be able to slow down Quinshon Judkins? Yeah, they might be able to.
My question to take it a step further is how much man coverage Penn State plays. We've seen Lane Kiffin in that offense with Jackson Dart. They're pretty content to scheme up a lot of those crossing patterns, a lot of those all coverage beaters, and just get it to their guys in space and let them cook. And we saw Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of take advantage of that same style of game when they came to Columbus to play them. Now, the good news for the folks in Happy Valley, there is no Marvin Harrison Jr. anywhere else in the country, much less in this football game. So that's good news for you. But I'm just curious how
Trey
much.
Harris.
Yeah, he can cook now a little bit. He's not Marvin Harrison Jr., but he can be a threat for you if they give him the ball in space. So just how difficult that offense is to defend. I'm a little bit nervous right now in this game, Andy, if I'm Penn State.
I am too. It's Penn State's a 4.5-point favorite. This is another one where I feel like if you give me points, I'm gonna take them in this situation. Yeah. And so give me Ole Miss plus the 4.5.
We're in lockstep here, Andy. I like Ole Miss to cover that 4.5. On our show, I picked Ole Miss outright. So we'll see if I have egg on my face the day after this game, but I think Ole Miss covers, and I think Ole Miss actually wins this football game. I don't love the idea, especially if early Ole Miss creates separation. It's like a 10-point game, and Ole Miss is ahead. I don't love Penn State's ability to have to chase there, so I'll take Ole Miss to win and to cover.
Now let's get weird. Let's go to South Florida. Georgia and Florida State. This line has moved from 14 points when it opened. Georgia is now favored by 19.5. There are 17 players on the Florida State 2-deep who were not on the Florida State 2-deep for the ACC championship game. JD is a completely different team. Brock Glenn's a starter. You also have to be careful with Brock Glenn because there are no more scholarship quarterbacks, basically. Like it is, Jordan Travis is hurt. Tate Rodemaker's gone. Like it is a strange situation. The Florida State team, and I know people say, well, Florida State they all should have played so they could prove the committee wrong. No, the committee told them their season didn't matter. So I don't blame any of the Florida State people for doing what they did. I don't blame them one bit. I do feel bad for the guys who have to play, though, because they're playing against some really good players at Georgia. We don't know if they'll see Georgia's biggest stars. But the other problem is, like, guys who are trying to win starting jobs next year at Georgia are really dangerous right now.
Yeah. No, without question. And I mean, I was trying to find a world where Florida State just wins this football game. Forget the number. Like, if Florida State just ends up winning this football game, and the key thing I kept coming back to
Louisville, like, we saw them with half a roster win a game. So it's not impossible.
No, not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. But, like, the big thing I kept coming back to was, like, I think it would take just the most lackadaisical showing from Georgia. And I think Kirby Smart, even though it was several years ago, I think he remembers the Sugar Bowl against Texas and hearing Sam Ehlinger jump on the mic and say Texas was back. I think he's still running off that fuel. And with Carson Beck being the trigger man for you still in this game, like, I think it's I don't see where the offense comes from for Florida State, even with Brock Glenn, having a game of experience now. It wasn't the game that provides a ton of confidence for me. So, yeah, this could not be a tremendous viewing pleasure in the second half of this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's not going to be the defense we saw from Florida State in the ACC championship game, because if that defense is completely intact, well, one, this number is not what it is. But if that defense were completely intact, Florida State would cover this number easily because it just wouldn't be that high scoring a game. But it's not. And that's the part I don't know what to do with this, because, again, Vegas making sure there's action on both sides. Like, this number is getting so big that I'm like, well, what if Georgia takes a lead and then empties the bench and Florida State scores some points? Like, I don't know. I still do think the guys who are playing for Florida State will be trying to prove a point. And there are still some really good players playing for Florida State. So it's such a big number. It's so hard to say I'm not going to take 19.5 points.
It's one of those things where I just feel like the depth of Georgia, like you said, even if they do clear the bench, let's say it's no Brock Bowers in the game at all, even to start this one. Let's say that they get there and 19's not playing. Well, then you got Oscar Delp. Well, you sub him out. Well, then you got Lawson Lucky. And just down the line, like, I don't see a world where Georgia takes their foot off the gas in terms of what those guys are doing from an effort standpoint. I think Georgia covers, Andy. I really do.
Well, and that's again what I said. What I was saying earlier about Georgia. Even if there are backup players in, these are like the offensive line. There's a lot of jobs open next year because there's guys going to the NFL. Like they're fighting for their starting job next year, and so they're highly motivated. And that's what you're looking at is motivation. And the motivation is it feels more on the side of Georgia players who will be there in 2024 versus the Florida State players right now. So yeah, I'm as much as it pains me to take a 19.5-point favorite in an Orange Bowl, I'm going to have to take Georgia here.
Yeah, true Florida man kind of game with the way the spread is working. Florida man kind of bowl with Georgia, Florida State. But no, we're in lockstep here once again.
Let us move to the desert. Liberty against Oregon. Now SMU very mad that they did not get the nod as the highest ranked Group of 5 champ, but Liberty undefeated. Jamie Chadwell's first season at Liberty, and this is an interesting one because I've wanted to see this offense against a team like this for a long time. I do think there's a talent gap, talent discrepancy, but this is an offense built to deal with the talent discrepancy. It is a triple option based spread passing attack, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I personally can't wait to see it. I just don't know if Liberty has the dudes to hang with Oregon.
Yeah, contrary to what the Ohio State social team said, this actually is the showdown in the desert, not the Cotton Bowl. But with that being said, I 100% agree with what you said about the defensive side. My concern is when it comes to Oregon and their ability to run the football. I'm not concerned about Oregon. I'm concerned about Liberty. Like you said, that talent gap and what happens on that line of scrimmage. I don't know that if there becomes a situation where Oregon just wants to, slow the game down and they decide they want to be the team that holds the ball. Not necessarily in Oregon's personality to do that offensively, but I think just the fact that they could do that makes me nervous about what Liberty would be able to do. Now, if it becomes a shootout and all bets are off in that standpoint, then we're going to have a really great view of this thing from a TV product standpoint. But I think Oregon's upfront ability is going to be too much.
Well, in the question of motivation, Liberty is certainly very motivated. They want to prove they belong in this situation. They want to prove they belong on this stage. So they're going to come out hair on fire. It's really, probably Oregon's going to need to withstand a pretty hard initial punch from Liberty. And, Caden Salter is a guy who initially signed with Tennessee, wound up at Liberty after he was dismissed from Tennessee. He's had a great season. He's very good for that offense. His skill set works very well with that offense. So, we could see some fireworks early, I think, because Liberty will be very, very pumped to be there. The question is, does Oregon withstand that? And I'm with you. I think if Oregon wants to at a certain point, it can just run the ball, let that offensive line do its job, and control everything. Obviously, everybody they want to send Bo Nix out on a good note. He wants to put some more good film out there. But I do think this will be a really good test for Jamie Chadwell and his staff that, part of their knock when they were at Coastal Carolina was you've never had to recruit at the Power 5 level. Because all of them have kind of been together and they've gone from D2 to FCS to FBS. And so if you are a fan of a school whose coach might be on the hot seat entering 2024, and you're thinking about Jamie Chadwell, pay special attention to how he handles this game, because his teams always seem prepared and they always seem to outplay what they're supposed to be.
We always have a game like this in New Year's Six, obviously by nature of a Group of 5 team playing in the New Year's Six, but doesn't it feel like there's always that game every 2-3 years where a team like a Liberty rolls in there and they're a massive underdog and that they've got a little bit of a, it factor to them with the way they run this offense. You mentioned Caden Salter, Jamie Chadwell, his resume speaks for itself. Could kind of be a sneaky one. Now, I'm not taking Liberty to cover or to win this game, but I do think that there's something to be said here for just what you mentioned at the top of this thing, the way that they attack offensively kind of mitigate some of that talent gap they may not have on the offensive side of the football, on the offensive line side, that is.
The way Liberty wins is that they jump on them, score a couple quick touchdowns, and then Oregon makes mistakes trying to come back and they turn the ball over. That's how that works. I don't see that happening. Because Oregon, I think, can just calm everything down and, like we're talking about, just really keep it on the ground or keep it high percentage through the air. Let playmakers in space handle everything else. So I'm going to take Oregon to cover the 16.5. But again, very excited to see the Jamie Chadwell offense on this stage because it's been one of my favorites to watch at the group of 5 level. I want to see it against this level of defense. It's going to be fun.
I think the Oregon want-to factor is there by the way that they finished in the Pac-12 title game, by Troy Franklin being snubbed for just even being a Blitnikoff Award finalist for Bo Nix not winning the Heisman. Like, I don't know if that necessarily is at the forefront of their mind, but I do think the Washington game left a bad taste in their mouth. I think they'll finish strong against Liberty.
All right. Let us get to the college football playoff. We'll start with the game I'm at, JD. Alabama and Michigan in the Rose Bowl. 2 classic brands in a classic setting. Beautiful environment.
Oh,
coaches who are legendary at their schools. Like, everything sets up for an incredible game. It's a 1.5 point spread. It's basically a pick 'em. JD, I cannot wait for this thing. I am very excited to see Jalen Milroe versus JJ McCarthy. These are 2 quarterbacks that I think are very much in firm command of their teams, in firm command of the offenses that they play in. That wasn't always the case for Jalen Milroe, but it is now. And this is going to be, I think, epic.
Andy, that intro, man, had me ready to run down on kickoff. I mean, I'm ready to go bust a wedge right now, brother. If we had Keith Jackson calling this thing, rest in peace, Mr. Keith Jackson, that would be the last puzzle piece to making this just college football poetry in every single sense. But no, like you mentioned, the matchup between quarterbacks here is really interesting. On Prize Picks, I took the more for both of these quarterbacks' rush totals. J.J. McCarthy was somewhere around 16 yards. Jalen Milroe is somewhere in the 30s. I think they're both going to have a major factor in this game. For J.J. McCarthy, I think you got to kind of be a change up to that sledgehammer approach they've been all season in that run game with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Also, we've seen Alabama have a little bit of issue against that design quarterback run, whether it be Jaden Daniels, whether it be Peyton Thorne. We've seen them get got a couple times. And then for Jalen Milroe, with him running the football, I think you got to kind of dance with the one that brung you. And we've seen when they are at their best, they are calling design quarterback runs. Andy, we sat side by side in Atlanta watching that Georgia defense not have issues diagnosing the quarterback run game, but have issues stopping those elephants on parade. So I think that ends up kind of being one of the key factors in this one for Alabama and for Michigan.
Oh, doctor, I hadn't been this excited for a game since I was knee-high to a doodle bug. Yes, that was a bad Keith Jackson. It was a bad Keith Jackson combined with the Keith Jackson from The Simpsons. So, which might have been actual Keith Jackson. I don't know if they had Hank Azaria impersonating him. But this one, you mentioned J.J. McCarthy. He looked limited running the ball at the end of the season. Like, he may have been hurt. He's had a month to recover. If there was an issue there, it may not be an issue anymore. And I do think that does open things up in terms of what he can do running the ball. I'm most worried about Michigan's offensive line protecting him in the pass game. We saw them basically abandon the pass game against Penn State because they felt like they couldn't protect him. That part scares me because if that happens against Alabama, you're done. Like, you ain't running the ball 20 times in a row against the Crimson Tide. That's not going to work. So he's going to need to be mobile. And then, listen, Alabama's offensive line has got to figure out how to stop Michigan's D-line. That's not the easiest thing in the world either. So I do think it's going to come down to whatever defense can affect the other quarterback more. And so right now, if I had to just pick based on that, because I do think that'll be the determining factor, I'm going to take Alabama to win this game.
No, I mean, I think the way you put that is exactly the way that I'm thinking about it as well. The way that Michigan wins this game is a pretty narrow path, and that is staying ahead of the sticks, running for right around 4 yards a carry, and not having negative plays. Just like you mentioned, against Alabama with how hot that defense has been and the way that they really, for the most part, kept Georgia at bay running the football. I don't know that Michigan is a tougher task than what Georgia brought to the table. If Michigan's going to win, they got to have answers outside of the run game. I don't know that they do by nature of the pass catchers. I love me some Colston Loveland. I love me some Roman Wilson. I don't know if I love them to win one-on-one against those Alabama defenders in the secondary. I think Alabama, if kind of what we said in a previous bowl game talking about the Penn State Ole Miss matchup, I think Alabama, if they can get some leverage on Michigan, I don't like Michigan to chase them. So for the exact same reason, I'm going to take Alabama to win this football game and obviously have them covering that +1.5.
All right, let's go to the Big Easy and figure out who else is going to play for the national title. Texas and Washington in the Sugar Bowl. And I got to tell you, JD, I have no read on this game at all in terms of who I think is going to win. I'm just being honest with you here. I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited for Michael Penix and those receivers against a really good Texas secondary with the Texas defensive line. We talked about them all season. We've not talked as much about the secondary, but those guys are deep and they can cover and they can make plays. And if they can, pick off Penix once or twice, different game. But I think we also, Braylon Trice, ZTF, Washington can get after your quarterback too. And we haven't seen any disastrous Quinn Ewers game yet this season. We saw a couple of them in 2022. They could create one of the, that's what I'm more worried about. Like an off game for Penix is not great. An off game for Ewers, you're losing.
Yeah, I mean, either way, like you said, for both these quarterbacks, it's going to be more shots than Bourbon Street offensively downfield. Like you got NFL wide receivers, 2 NFL quarterbacks. It's going to be a high-scoring affair from where I'm sitting. I think when I try to break this game down, I break it down through the lens of when I played the NCAA 14 video game, and I know you're an NCAA guy as well, Andy. It's going to be so many points scored. It's going to be like trade and drives. It's going to be who has more bullets. And whenever I played that kind of game with my buddy, it came down to 2 things. 1, who gets that key turnover? And I think I lean towards Texas in that scenario. And then 2, who can downshift the best and just kind of make it ugly in the fourth quarter and run the football and kind of play keep away. I think both those things favor Texas. Texas, that's who they are offensively. Up front, they run for right around 200 yards a game. And then the depth they have in the backfield, whether it's Jaden Blue, whether it's CJ Baxter, Keelan Robinson, I think they have some different sets of tires they can rotate through there. So for that reason, I could see a game where Roma Dunze just says, hey, I'm him today. I'm taking over. And that's the way that Washington wins. But going back to what we said about our previous playoff game as well, I think there's more ways, more styles Texas can play in this game to end up finding a way.
Yeah, and Texas having such a diversity of skill talent, A.D. Mitchell, J.T. Sanders. I think C.J. Baxter's very good as a freshman running back. A lot of ways to beat you. That said, what you just described, you talk about a team that can muck it up, that can run out the clock or run the ball to victory in the fourth quarter. Is that not what Washington did to Oregon in the championship game?
No, it absolutely is. And I think that was one of the first things that I said to you when we got to Atlanta, because Oregon had just played Washington. I was like, Andy, I did not see a world where Washington's offensive line did what they did to Oregon the night before. And so, I mean, I could sit here yet again for another time this season and say, hey, I was wrong about Washington. And that would be, par for the course for what this season has been with me picking the Huskies. Also, I think they're kind of the Alex Honnold of this entire college football playoff. They don't flinch when they're up there on the cliff. They don't feel that pressure free soloing in a one-score game. They're 7-0 in one-score games. And so the way that they are kind of immune to that pressure, that could also be a thing that favors Washington and kind of could be a path for them to victory as well. So I think the depth of Texas still makes me lean towards the Longhorns in this one with what they have in that backfield. But if it's the same kind of game style they had in that first half against Oregon, we might be seeing purple for the second year in the college football national title.
Well, I think for those reasons you just said, I'm taking Washington here. I'm getting points against the spread. So even if Texas wins, as long as it's close, I'm good. But I think Washington can win this thing straight up. I think Washington can make the national title game. So give me the Huskies, and I appreciate the 4.5 points.
There we go. I'll take Washington to cover, so I'll really sit on the fence here. I'll take Washington to cover right around a field goal game, but I will take Texas to outright win and maybe get a little rematch in the national title between Bama and Texas, which I want to be a fan of, but if we get it, we get it. And regardless, any 4 of these teams, I think, for the first time in a long time, has a real shot to take home the hardware.
Absolutely. This is the first time in the 14 playoff era, which ends after this, but the first time I felt like all 4 teams had a chance to win the national title. And I am very excited about that. And I hope everybody else is too. We will be with you all weekend. We got a show on Saturday, coming off the media days for the the Rose and Sugar Bowl. So we'll have plenty of stuff there. And obviously on Sunday, we will break it all down and get you ready for the college football playoff. And we'll talk about all these other games that will have happened. We'll know if JD was right, or if I was right, or if we both were right with these games. But it is the best weekend of the year. This is going to be so much fun. JD, talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Andy.